Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Well, for those of you for which it's afternoon, it's the beginning of the afternoon here in Brussels, Belgium. My name is Andrea Glorioso. I work as a policy official in the European Commission, working on a number of dossiers, but most of the time on the so-called global internet governance dossier. I was supposed to be joined for this webinar by Michael Niebel, who is the head of the task force that work on the communication on internet policy and governance, but unfortunately, Michael Niebel has to send his regret because he had a last-minute meeting which he could not postpone. So you will have to do with me. But I have been working very closely with Michael Niebel and some other colleagues on the communication, so I hope I will be able to provide you with information that you will find useful. The way that I would like to proceed is I have prepared a shortest presentation on the communication. I would like to go through the main rationale and the main points of the communication, and I will try to do it as quickly as possible without rushing too much. And then I would be very glad to hear your questions and comments or anything you would like to share on the communication. So without further ado, I'm looking right now at the communication. So the communication and topic of this webinar is a statement. A communication is a statement by an official statement, a formal statement by the European Commission. And it was adopted on the 12th of February 2014 after a discrete number of months of work and of consultations as well. We ran a public consultation. We discussed with our member states on a number of occasions. Ultimately, this communication, which is entitled, as you know, the Communication on Internet Policy and Governance, Europe's Role in Shaping the Future of the Internet, what I think is immediately important to clarify is that for formal reasons, a communication from the Commission is a statement that is addressed normally, and certainly in this case, to the European Parliament, to the Council of the European Union, to the member states, as in this case as well to two other bodies of the European Union, which are the European Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions. Why am I saying this? It is not to bore you with the procedural details of EU decision-making, but because it is extremely important for us to underline, and this might be misunderstood from outside the European Union, that what I'm going to talk about, what has been adopted, is the position of the European Commission. It is not, as of yet, it is not the position of the European Union as a whole. It might become, we certainly hope that it will become, or that it will be a basis for a position of the European Union as a whole, once the Council of the European Union, in this case, and of course we are very much looking forward to the position of the European Parliament also in this matter, react to this communication, which is what a number of EU member states are already doing. So again, the only point I would like to clarify here, and the one thing that perhaps together with the content, with the positions of the European Commission on internet governance, I would like you to take home, is that for the time being, this communication is the position of the European Commission. Now, having said that, I'm moving ahead with the presentation. The baseline, the base rationale for which we moved to adopt this communication is that we believe that a sustainable governance framework, which involves all stakeholders, is essential to preserve the benefits of the Internet. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the definitional details of what is or is not Internet governance. For our communication, we base ourselves on what is the globally understood working definition of Internet governance, which can be found in the conclusions to the World Summit on the Information Society, the so-called Tunis agenda, which is the development and application by governments, the private sector, and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the Internet. Now, we accept that we believe that the notion of Internet governance should be flexible, should evolve, but nonetheless, for the purposes of our position, this is our starting point. So a rather broad notion of Internet governance that certainly, and you will know if you have read the communication, and you will no doubt that I will present it to you, our notion of internet governance goes beyond the mere discussions about ICANN, which are important discussions, or the evolution of the Internet Governance Forum, which again are important discussions. For us, the global governance of the Internet is a much more complex notion, which involves an ecosystem of different actors, a network of different actors, of different institutions, fora, persons, businesses, etc. Now, again, in terms of rationale, what our commitment is as the European Commission, and this is not a commitment coming out of the blue, because this position that I'm showing to you now is a position that the European Commission has held for quite a long time, since in fact the days of the World Summit on the Information Society, 2002-2005. We had already adopted a communication in 2009 on internet governance. So I would say that this latest official statement that we, the Commission, that the College of Commissioners, the European Commission, has adopted in February this year, is the latest confirmation, with some evolutions, I think, of a position that is close to the heart of the European Commission, which is that we commit to work with partners to rebuild trust in the Internet, which we do think has been weakened by a number of reasons, some more recent, some not so recent. For example, the impact of cybercrime, which continues to be a worry for people. People around the world and organizations around the world do not necessarily have the level of trust that they should have, or that we hope they would have, in order to fully use the Internet. So we believe that having trust in the Internet, in its technical operations, in its governance frameworks, is an essential prerequisite for a sustainable future for an open Internet. And for us, the key word here is sustainable. Very often we have been asked, what is the problem that you see that they're trying to solve? Now, we might have a very long discussion whether we are having a problem today or not, and different people will have different opinions, certainly, as normally happens. But the point is that it is not sufficient for us to be happy with what we have today. We also, and certainly we as a public authority, as the European Commission, we feel the responsibility on our side to think about what the future is going to bring us, how we can ensure that the future evolution of the Internet and of its governance framework at different levels, at the global, at the regional, at the national level, is actually strong enough, accountable enough, flexible enough to cope with change, to cope with the fact that we have not anymore the Internet of the 70s or the 80s of the previous century. We are not anymore working with an Internet devoted to a few scientists and the military apparatus. We have an Internet which is used by billions of people and will be used by more billions in the near future. And this obviously introduces pressure on the system, introduces constraints, and therefore for us it is extremely important to work together in a cooperative fashion to understand what is the best way to ensure that the future evolution of the Internet and its governance can indeed sustain the changes, at least those that we can envision. As somebody else has said, there are things we know that we don't know. There are also things that we don't know we don't know. So for that, the best we can do is to try to design a resilient system, but not much more. Now, in terms of overarching objectives, for the Commission, for the European Commission, what we would like to do with our EU member states, with European stakeholders, with our citizens, is to build, certainly from our perspective, on the basis of our communication, but it is a matter to be discussed, a common European vision for Internet governance to defend and promote fundamental rights and democratic values based on multi-stakeholder governance structure that are based on clear rules and that respect those fundamental rights and those democratic values. I would like to underline right from the start that if you have read the communication, the support for the multi-stakeholder approach to Internet governance is a red line for us. We are never going to compromise on that. The point remains, however, that we do believe that multi-stakeholder governance has to respect certain, you don't want to call them rules, fine, people sometimes have a problem with the term, but have to respect certain characteristics, including the respect for fundamental rights and democratic values. And secondly, in terms of overarching objective, we want the internet to remain a single, unfragmented network. Again, this is a clear red line for us. We do not believe in national intranets or in national segments of the internet. That for us is a very, very naive way of looking at the internet, and it is a very short-sighted way to look at the economic, social, cultural, and political benefits that a global single internet can bring all of us. As I said before, in terms of the model, the governance model that in our view, that in the view of the European Commission, should underpin the governance of the internet, the multi-stakeholder model, an inclusive, open, bottom-up model is essential. At the same time, we cannot be naive, and we cannot close our eyes in front of the legal environment which we have in front of us. A legal environment which, by the way, might have problems, but it has also been designed in order to protect rights. It has been designed to the extent possible, having in mind democratic checks and balances. This is why one of our objectives is that even when we are having intergovernmental discussions on the internet, on policies related to the internet, and those intergovernmental discussions will continue. Whether people like it or not, they exist and they will continue. But our position is that even in the cases where those intergovernmental discussions take place or have to take place, even in those cases, we need to inject as much stakeholder participation as possible, to the extent possible. We need more transparency, we need more accountability, we need, in general, to apply principles of good governance both to the existing intergovernmental discussions around the internet and to multi-stakeholder discussions. Because that is our other point. We should not again be naive and think it simply because we call something multi-stakeholder, then therefore that process or that discussion is good by definition. Even when we are in the middle of multi-stakeholder processes, we still have to request certain baselines of transparency, accountability, inclusiveness, absence of conflict of interest, etc. And we need, to the extent possible, to come to some sort of mutual understanding of what are the necessary baselines. How do we implement those baselines of good governance principles for multi-stakeholder processes? Because otherwise our fear, and the reality, certainly in my personal experience, is that everybody uses the term multi-stakeholder, but people mean very different, attach very different meanings to the term, and this creates, in the best of worlds, it creates confusion. In the world in which we live in, it not only creates confusion, but it can also inject a certain degree of untransparency, to be honest, and that we want to strengthen. So again, bottom line, key message. We fully support the multi-stakeholder model, but we do believe that there are spaces for improvement, and we want to work together with other parties to implement those improvements, to agree on what those improvements might be, and then to work to implement those improvements. And then two other key points of our communication is that we want, and we would like to see it urgently, a strengthened and a reformed Internet Governance Forum. The IGF has been an excellent experiment, has been one of the most innovative outputs of the World Summit on Information Society. As you might know, the European Commission is one of the main financial funders of the IGF, and we are happy about that because we strongly believe in the IGF. Nonetheless, there are areas where the IGF could perform better, and we think that it should. We think that it should by everybody, by everyone who is interested, it should be strengthened precisely because it is an essential component of a distributed, inclusive approach to Internet governance. And secondly, and this is what I must say, the media have focused their attention when they received our communication, our statement, even though, as I said, the communication on Internet policy and governance is quite broader than simply this point. But yes, the communication does call for a globalized Internet for a globalized ICANN and for a globalized IANA. As a matter of fact, we are calling for a general globalization of Internet core functions, which do include ICANN and IANA. Now, I would like to go quickly through the various activities and actions that we envisage in the communication. At this stage, I'm not going to spend too much time describing them because I would rather prefer to hear if you have any questions or any comments on any of the actions of the communication that we have put on the table in the communication. I would be glad to react to them. So, first of all, we very much favor the agreement at the global level, if possible, of a coherent set of principles, of a coherent set of global internet governance principles, which in our view should be consistent with the fundamental rights and democratic values. And why we think that those principles will be useful? Because, of course, we have the Tunis agenda, we have the principles of the World Summit on the Information Society. Nonetheless, 10 years have passed from the almost 10 years have passed from the conclusions of the World Summit on the Information Society. And we think that, well, we see that a number of organizations have come up with their own vision of what the principles for the internet should be. Sometimes they're more substantive, sometimes they're more procedural. And we do think that it would be useful to try and see if there is space for a common understanding, for a common agreement on a certain high-level principle, which will be useful as they should not be legally binding in our view, but they could usefully serve as signposts to guide further and perhaps more operational discussions on the internet and on its governance. As a matter of fact, the European Commission, since some time, and now formally with the adoption of this communication, has, I must say, mostly these are the principles which we believe are useful for us in terms of how we, the European Commission, see our work in the field of the internet or the internet governance. And it is the so-called compact. So an internet as a space of civic responsibilities, one unfragmented resource, which should be based on a multi-stakeholder approach and should promote democracy and human rights. It should be based on a sound technological architecture that should be able to evolve, and it should engender confidence and trust, whether it's security or privacy or consumer protection. Trust is extremely important for us and for users and for citizens. And it should be based on a transparent governance. Transparency and, in general, good governance principles, as I said, are extremely relevant and important for us. As I said, some of the actions that we are planning to work on extensively is strengthening the Internet Governance Forum, including on the basis of the recommendations of the UN Working Group on improvements to the AGL. We do think that we should clearly define the role of public authorities in the multi-stakeholder Internet context, which should A, be consistent with an open and free Internet, B, it should be consistent with the obligations of public authorities, including their obligations under human rights law. And here, allow me, because there have been misunderstandings, frankly. I'm not saying they were willful or not, but there have been misunderstandings on what we said in the communication, and specifically on this point. When the Commission says that we want to define the role of public authorities, this should not, and I repeat, not be understood as implying that in each and every case, the role of public authorities should be strengthened. As a matter of fact, when you define the role of public authorities, you also constrain the role of public authorities, because you introduce rules. And if you don't want to call them rules, call it some other way. But the bottom line is that in doing this work, we accept, the European Commission accepts, that there might be spaces and occasions and policies in which the role of public authority should be less than it is today, in which we should give more space to self-regulation or co-regulation. And this has been a long-standing position of the European Commission in many areas, and I just want to confirm that it remains a position also in the internet space. And thirdly, we do think that we do want to facilitate what we call issue-based dialogues. What do we mean by that? The reality today is that you have a lot of organizations dealing with either internet governance or internet-related public policies or internet policies or internet standardization, you name them. And sometimes what happens is that you have silos. You have people not talking to one another, organizations not talking to one another, you have duplication. Organization A decides to work on privacy on the internet, even though organization B is already working on privacy on the internet, without even assessing whether it would make more sense to work with the two organizations work together. So we would like to find ways, together with other stakeholders, on how we can operationalize a more pragmatic approach to internet governance. So let's focus on the problems, let's focus on the challenges, let's focus on the issues, and let's find ways across organizations to discuss and find solutions to those issues, problems, and challenges. As I said, we strongly believe that it is now time, and things are already happening, but certainly we want them to happen, and to happen as quickly as possible. We want to see a further globalization of the IANA functions and a clear timeline for the globalization of ICANN. To be clear, these are requests, these are positions that we have been taking for, as the European Commission has been taking for many years. So we understand the constraints. We understand it is important to ensure that any change in the system continues to ensure and to safeguard the stability and security of the internet. Nonetheless, at this point in time, in February 2014, we really do think that it's time to put some dates on the table. I don't think that it is any more acceptable. We don't think that it is any more acceptable to kick the can down the road, to continue saying, yeah, you're right, we'll think about it, and maybe in 2-3 years we'll do something about it. The reality, as I said in the beginning, or if not the reality, our clear perception, our clear position is that because of a factual change in the level of trust in the current system, whether people like it or not, this change is a fact. We cannot postpone decisions and discussions too much. This doesn't mean that decisions should be rushed. This doesn't mean that we should change just for the sake of changing, but we want to be engaged in a realistic and pragmatic discussion on how to move forward with clear timelines. As I said, we would also like to work with stakeholders, and that could be via exchange of best practices or other means. If people come to us and make proposals, we are very eager to listen. We do think that we should seriously start to think on what the multi-stakeholder model means in practice. Do we need more accountability? Do we need rules for accountability? Which kind of rules? Where should they be applied? Maybe we need some high-level objectives which should then be adapted to each specific situation. In terms of capacity building, which we believe is an important element in these global discussions, we are going to launch in 2014 the technical development of an initiative which we have been starting to work on already since 2013, the Global Internet Policy Observatory, which is meant to be a technological tool to help overcome that division in silos and organization, in general, the overload of information on internet policy making that exists today. I'll be happy to provide more details if people are interested. We think that there is a need to promote multi-stakeholder processes in countries and regions which do not have a lot of experience in that. I think we have to be, without being paternalistic, which is not at all our intention, but I think we need to realize that certain notions which are part and parcel of the multi-stakeholder model, or what is meant today as the multi-stakeholder model, inclusiveness, participation, consensus building, etc., might be more familiar in certain parts of the world than in others. And therefore, we do believe that not the Commission, but all stakeholders should work in order to develop capacity on what it actually means to design multi-stakeholder decision-making processes or policy-making processes in all parts of the world. And last but not least, we are committing as the European Commission to strengthen our development assistance programs in support of media development, freedom of expression, and the technological policy and regulatory capacity building in relation to the internet. Another action, this is perhaps more interesting for the Europeans among you, but maybe not. One thing that we would like to do, that we are committing to do as the European Commission, is to launch a broad consultation, which, by the way, as all consultations of the European Commission, will be open to all in the world. It's not only a consultation for European citizens or organizations. We would like to understand if and how we could build a better multi-stakeholder involvement in the formulation of future EU Internet governance policies. We have the impression that nowadays, depending on the particular field related to the Internet where we work on, multi-stakeholder involvement is more or less developed. It's sometimes easier, it's sometimes harder for us to involve stakeholders. It is certainly difficult for us to avoid fragmentation. So all we want to see here is whether there are better options which will be available for us to strengthen a better multi-stakeholder involvement at the level of the Union in the development of our Internet policies. Another action that we are committed to work on, they are actually interrelated actions. And very briefly, the Commission believes, well, it's not only us, a lot of people, a lot of organizations believe that technological development, whether it is in the form of standardization, product development, innovation, research, does have very often public policy implications. It can have it in the field of privacy, it can have it in the field of security, consumer protection, more generally human rights, etc. This leads to two considerations. The first is that more and more we are seeing technology as a kind of a source of law. It's not law, it's not legislation, but in fact, technology has effects, and technological choices have effects that might be even greater than legislation. They certainly are faster than legislation. We are not suggesting that we should drop legislation out of the window. That's not our job, and we don't believe it. But I think we need to have a reflection with experts, with people who are interested, with actionable recommendations on how we can ensure that this trend of norms creation, the creation of norms by technology, and the creation of norms by law can better interact with one another. And one element of this is we would encourage all stakeholders, and allow me to underline that the Commission is not proposing to do anything itself. The Commission is simply encouraging other stakeholders to strengthen or to create, where they don't exist, structure mechanisms. And the nature and the form of this mechanism, if they are needed, is completely up to the relevant stakeholders. We do believe that it is at least a question to be asked whether you have, as a standardization organization, as a technology company, do you have structure mechanisms, easy to use mechanism that would ensure a early on upstream continuous involvement of other stakeholders, academia, civil society, NGOs, and normal citizens, to assess whether the technology or the specification of the standards that we're developing have taken into account from the early moments of development, of design and development, have taken into account possible public policy implications. We are also accelerating, we are calling on our partners in the EU, the Council and the Parliament, to accelerate on the adoption of certain pieces of legislation that we believe are essential to strengthen trust on the Internet. The privacy data protection review that we are conducting right now in the European Union, a directive on cybersecurity and network and information security, and some other pieces of legislation which we believe, as I said, are extremely important to strengthen trust on the Internet. And last but not least, we are going to launch, this is more of a long-term exercise if you want, but we do want to launch an in-depth review of possible risks, both at the European and international level, of conflict laws and jurisdictions when it comes to Internet activities. Because right now what we see is a very ad hoc, a very reactive approach to this conflict. So which jurisdiction applies, which law applies, when you have a cross-border transnational activities, these are questions that arise all the time. Now, we do not have the solution now. We won't have it for tomorrow. It is possible that as part of this review, we might conclude, look, all in all, the existing mechanisms that we have to handle this conflict are appropriate, so we do not need to do a lot more, but at least we want to make this assessment, and we would certainly like to involve the international community of all stakeholders in this review. And to conclude, again, as I said, for us, the bottom line is very clear. The internet should remain a single, open, free, and unfragmenting network of networks. It should be subject to the same laws and norms that apply in other areas of our day-to-day life. The rule of law has to apply on the internet as well. The governance of the internet should be based on the multi-stakeholder model. This again is a red line for us. We are not going to compromise on this, but this model has to be inclusive, transparent, accountable. It has to safeguard the possibility for public authorities to intervene in a regulatory manner when it is necessary. And I accept that there will be differences of views when this is necessary, but the notion that public authorities cannot, in principle, intervene via regulation, to be clear, is not acceptable for us. It should be safe, it should be sound, secure, and resilient. And whatever we do, we should make sure that the innovation power of the internet is not compromised. This, for us, again, it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. But the internet has brought so many benefits to our lives that even considering the negative side effects, we are taking, as the Commission, we are taking a very prudent approach to any kind of top-down, which we don't favor top-down interventions. But even when faced with discussions on what others might like, and even when we believe that regulation might be needed, in any case, we are very, we commit to assessing very carefully how those interventions can preserve the innovation potential of the internet. Now, all of this, and this is, I would like to say, I think it's the one word which summarizes my and my colleagues' work on this communication, is that all of this does not require control, does not require always regulation. It does require stewardship. And this stewardship, which as some of you might be well aware, the notion of stewardship was used and is used very frequently in environmental discussions. And this is no surprise, because the internet as well is something for humankind. There are commercial benefits on the internet, and every part of the world, every business, every country, the European Union has its own strategic interest on the internet. Again, let's not be naive, we are very aware of that. But we do not want the system to develop in a direction in which we would forget how important it is that we try to work together to find a sustainable future for the internet, not only for us, but also for the future generation. And this is the notion of stewardship, which is so important in the environmental area, and it is so important for us in the internet governance area. No top-down control, no regulation each and every time. There might be moments when it is needed. It is a common stewardship. So this is how the European Commission, what the European Commission has put on the table. This is our view for what is important in the next 2 years. And now I'm finished with my presentation, so I will be glad to take any question, which I think will be arriving to chat. So I guess that I will be having a quick look at the questions that I'm seeing in the chat, so if you will bear with me for just a second. So I see a comment here from Mariela Maciel. To preserve the unfragmenting interest is one of the reasons why internet governance needs to be improved. There are many incentives to fragmentation today, mistrust post-Snowden, discussion of frameworks, etc. So Mariela, I will not comment. The European Commission has already taken its own position on the so-called Snowden revelation. It has already adopted a communication in November last year on EU-US data flows. So I will not comment on the specifics, but I want to say that yes, we completely agree that the risk of fragmentation of the internet and the fact that a weakening of the trust in the global system might lead to a technical and political fragmentation is for us one of the main reasons why we do believe that we need a forward-looking and positive agenda for the evolutionary, not revolutionary, but evolutionary strengthening of internet governance. We should become more inclusive, more accountable, etc. Now, further comments. I have a comment from Amrita Chuduri, and I apologize in advance if I am mispronouncing the name. I think it is also important to elaborate what changes the multi-stakeholder model should have, I imagine, to take care of the current issue. Well, that is a kind of it's a difficult question to answer in the webinar. We don't have that much time. I have shared some of the high-level points where we think that the multi-stakeholder model, where we think that we need to focus our attention for the improvement of the multi-stakeholder model. And again, there basically it's not rocket science. This is about good governance. And good governance is a concept that has not been invented in the internet age. It is not a concept that is tied to internet governance. As a matter of fact, as many of you are aware, the multi-stakeholder model is not an invention of the World Summit on the Information Society, and it is not a notion linked only to the internet. The notion of multi-stakeholder governance was first introduced in, at least in global governance discussions, in discussions about the environment and development. So I would be happy perhaps to follow up more in detail on this particular point, what in practice we should do. But to be very honest, I take the points we noted, and it's a real we noted, not simply yes, we noted and then we forget about it. But I will not be able to go into the specific details now. But let's continue this conversation, please. Then I have Pete Cranston that would like to have more information on the JIPO. Pete, JIPO is an initiative which is an initiative launched by the European Commission and other partners. Even though at this moment, to be clear, the European Commission is perhaps the driving entity, but this does not mean that it should remain an initiative of the European Commission. But anyway, the objective, the goal of JIPO, the Global Internet Policy Observatory, would be to develop a web-based tool that would automatically collect information, whether it's documents, videos, meeting minutes, meeting agendas, you name it, statements of principles, academic papers, data such as internet traffic, etc. So the idea of JIPO is to have a system that automatically collects such information, that it's through techniques of data mining and automated data analysis, tries to find commonalities, linkages between these different data. Now we'll make a stupid example. If the system is designed to check for meeting agendas, to analyze meeting agendas, and the system discovers that the meeting agenda for organization A is going to include privacy, and the meeting agenda for another meeting for organization B will also include privacy, the system should be designed. What we want to have is a system that will tell the end user, are you aware that organization A and organization B are both having meetings on privacy as it relates to the internet, of course? And this, in our view, this another example that I could give, would ultimately help end users to make a bit of order within the overflow of information, which in our view is not the only, but is one of the big reasons why, let's be very honest about it, discussions on internet governance and internet policies are very restricted. There are very few people, if you look at other policy areas, which actually engage really here. Now, this is not the only reason, but we certainly believe that the substantive complexity and the institutional complexity, the organizational complexity of internet-related policies is an obstacle, and JIPO is one of the ways in which we would try to overcome it. Again, Peter, I will be happy to, I guess that my contact details will be shared, they can be shared, and I will be happy to follow up more in detail on that. Let me see if I see any other idea or question. So I see a point made from Hanane Boujemi. Full agreement, the technical decision should be aligned with human rights. It will be great to bridge the gap between the technical community and human rights advocates in the community. Well, we fully agree. I'm happy that we agree. Of course, the devil is in the details. And the technical community, or at least those parts of the technical community that we have been spoken to, are understandably, if you will, understandably, a bit worried that by injecting vague from their perspective, vague notions of public policy, vague notions, again, from their perspective on human rights, this might compromise their way of doing technical work, which, let's face it, has produced quite good results. So again, the position of the Commission is we don't give immediate solutions. We don't give recipes, neither on this nor in other points of our communication, because A, we don't think that we have necessarily the right recipe, and B, even if we had, we have learned by experience, to be very honest, that in this environment you have to have the buy-in. You have to work together to find a solution. Even if we had the perfect solution, for whatever definition of perfect one might have, we would not be able, it would not work to go to another constituency, in this case the technical community, give them a blueprint and tell them this is how you have to do things. And this is why what we encourage in the communication is a reflection on this point that you raise, is a reflection, is raising the question, are you taking into account in your processes human rights consideration, human rights implications, consumer protection implications, privacy implications of the technical work that you're doing? Then we are very eager, to be honest, to have a dialogue, to have a conversation about that. There are different solutions that can be found. What I must admit is a bit, it is frankly difficult to envision a situation in which every single NGO that cares about the public policy, particular aspect of public policy, all governmental officials would follow all the mailing lists of the technical community or all the communication channels, exactly like it is not envisionable that all citizens or the technical community follows everything that happens in the decision-making process of the European Commission or of any other public institution. So it's true that the technical community on the internet is fairly open. Whether it also means that it is actively inclusive is a different question. As I said, and I want to be very clear on this, we are not pushing for any ready-made solution. We are not, and I want to underline this very, very clearly, we are not suggesting at all that public authorities or any other organization should have some kind of veto power over certainly not over standardization decisions for the internet technical community. It's more about building a structure and productive dialogue, which we think that, yes, would be necessary. I'm going through other questions or comments that have arrived. Marilia points out that Europe has a certain experience about conflicts of jurisdictions. Yes, we do, but we are not suggesting that our model, the way that we have approached this conflict, should be a global template. To be very clear, we do think that we do have a certain expertise to put on the table, but we are eager to talk to other parts of the world as well to understand if there is a problem, which quite frankly we kind of think there is. If there is a problem and what might be the steps ahead to mitigate this problem. I have a point by Veronica Cretu. Given the recent developments in some of the Eastern Partnership countries, particularly Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, who are being under continuous pressure from Russia when it comes to the internet and overall internet governance related issues, what does the EC plan to do in regards to this region in the immediate future, at least by the end of 2014? I think, Veronica, I can answer to you, first of all, and I can be very honest on this. The situation is sensitive. You know it better than I do. I am not going to go into the details of discussion of what we are doing or not doing or what we are going to do right here and right now, because the situation is particularly sensitive. Having said that, part of our neighborhood program, the European EMP, the European Neighborhood Program, including the Eastern Partnership, has always included regulatory cooperation, capacity building, etc. I think that if you want to go more in detail, what will be helpful, but again, and I'm sorry to say that, but as a Commission official, I need to say that I am not ready to have a public discussion on this topic on this very day. I must be very clear. I don't have clearance to have that kind of in-depth discussion. I will be happy, however, if you or other colleagues as well, or other persons as well, wanted to have a more perhaps detailed discussion, but that should happen in the appropriate setting and not on a public webinar. I hope you can understand the situation for everyone involved. So I have a point by Ginger Park. Will the Commission be active in the Net Mundial meeting in Brazil to bring the concept to the global discussion there? The answer is a resounding yes. Nelly Kroes, the Vice President of the European Commission, responsible for the digital agenda for internet governance, has been invited to Net Mundial. She is going to attend the Net Mundial meeting. She is in fact also a member of the high-level multi-stakeholder committee. We are in the process of finalizing our contribution, our input to Net Mundial, both on the principles and on the roadmap parts that the Brazilian government or the Brazilian organizers have requested. This will be sent, I imagine, and I should know because I will be the one physically sending them, but our contribution will be sent in the course of today or tomorrow at the latest. To be crystal clear, and I want this to be very clear, at the moment, the contribution that we are going to send will be a contribution of the European Commission. It will not be a contribution of the European Union because the Council of the European Union, that is EU member states, have not yet taken a common position on our communication. You will notice, however, that a number of EU member states have already sent or will send their own input, and I think, but this is your own judgment, in my opinion, the positions of EU member states that are sending their own contribution and our position as the European Commission are actually quite close in terms of substance. That is our perception. I do have then a point from Michel Chevalier. How do these proposals articulate with the effort of the United Nations to define a framework of confidence-building measures regarding Internet as a weapon? Let me answer this question in two steps, Michel. First of all, and I need to be very clear on that, we are not calling for a stronger involvement of the United Nations in the governance of the Internet. The UN is already involved from many points of view, from many aspects in the governance of the Internet. Different agencies of the UN are involved. The IGF, as we know very well, is a forum under the umbrella of the United Nations, but we are not calling for a stronger involvement of the UN in this context. When it comes specifically to confidence-building measures, the EU and its member states have been following very closely these discussions. We, as you know, that the so-called UN group of governmental experts has recently reported on the applicability of international law to the Internet, more specifically to cyberspace when it concerns to security. It's a discussion that we are following very closely, but to be clear, we have serious doubts that it would be useful for anyone to start defining the Internet as a weapon, to start looking for definitions in that area, to start putting up borders and fences. We are in support, the EU has always been in support of international law, but we have international law. So there are certain proposals coming from certain parties claiming that we need new treaties. And that, to be clear, is not, we do not agree. We do not agree that we need new treaties, certainly not in the area or defining whether the Internet is a weapon or not. The solution to this kind of problems is more dialogue, more confidence-building measures, and as the EU, we do actually fund, including via our European cybersecurity strategy, a number of projects to develop confidence-building measures. So dialogue, confidence-building measures, yes, they are needed, and we're working with other partners on that. New binding treaties, new international legal instruments, no. We actually do say it, you might have seen, we do say it very clearly in our communication that the Commission is not calling for new legal instruments when it comes to Internet governance. Let me see if there are other comments. From Marilia, what are the chances that this position becomes a EU position? What have been the points of most agreement and disagreement? Marilia, to be very honest with you, I am not at liberty, and I would tell you, but as a official of the European Commission, I need to respect the fact that these discussions are taking place right now in the Council of the European Union. And it is a decision of the Council, which is the member states of the European Union, how much and whether they want to share of their positions when it comes to the communication. We think that it would be advisable to have a discussion on substance with as much transparency as possible. We know that a number of member states agree with us, not necessarily on the substance, but certainly that we should have a discussion on it. Now, let me see if I can at least give you some glimpses. I think that's my impression is that the real differences, as I said, are not on the substance, are not on the political objectives. There are certain differences. A very few member states have let us know that they do have also differences on substance. Fair enough, that's life. I think it will become very apparent what those member states are when you will see the submissions to NetMondial, because those submissions reflect, just like in our case, they reflect quite faithfully the general position related to the communication. But with the exception of very, very few member states, my impression is that the differences are not so much of substance. There are simply some, if you will, some differences on how quickly should we move in these discussions, on which kind of focus should be given to the role of government, without naming names, but just to let you understand the fact that there are different points of view. Some of our member states, as well as some other stakeholders, have criticized us because, in their view, our communication and our position give too much attention to the role of government. Other member states and other stakeholders have criticized us because, in their view, we do not give enough focus to the role of government. In fact, our view is that normally, having worked in the Commission for quite some time, our view is that if everybody's criticizing you, you're probably doing something right because you're trying to strike the middle ground. In terms of timing, we recognize the concerns of not only some of our member states, but also of other stakeholders with whom we spoke. We are ready to discuss and to try to get on board as much as possible other views in order to get the EU position, which I think will be possible for NetMondial. I'm strongly confident that we will have a EU position because, as I said, I don't think that there are many differences in substance. But in terms of timing, I want to underline, let me just give you, one person told me that by adopting this communication, the European Commission, in the opinion of this person, has opened a Pandora's box. We think that the Pandora's box had already been opened. And the choice in front of us right now is that, and I'm saying this with all due respect to other persons and other organizations' positions, but the choice in front of us is to either, as we say in Italy, play the game of the three monkeys that they don't see, they don't hear, and they don't speak. All we have to recognize that the Pandora's box is open, things are getting out, and we have to put on the table a positive agenda, which is as inclusive as possible towards the global community in order to step forward. Because for us, continuing to say no, no, no to any change is not sustainable. This doesn't mean having to say yes to every change. In the communication, we make it very clear what our red lines, and those red lines will remain. But this doesn't mean that we cannot find and we shouldn't find space for compromise and for common advancement, keeping into account again that time changes, the internet changes, the internet that we have today and that we will have in 10 years cannot be and will not be the internet of 10 years ago. Let me see. I think that I addressed actually all the comments and questions that arrived. So is there any other last-minute comment or question that people would like to raise? If not, and I'm just giving like 40 minutes for everybody to type. I think that we are. I think that all comments have arrived. So let me thank Diplo for organizing this webinar. Let me thank all of you for your very pertinent questions and points. Oh, sorry, I see that I am not responding to a comment from Shellyan. Shellyan, if you limit 30 seconds and try to I must have missed your comment. I'm sorry. Okay, Shellyan says. It is agreed that a multi-stakeholder approach is the ideal. In small states, it is sometimes difficult to secure such involvement, and if government does not take the lead, little happens. I think that's a very pertinent comment, and I apologize for having missed it. And this is the challenge that we have. It's and I don't want to trivialize other organizations' position, but it is sometimes very easy to talk about bottom-up involvement, multi-stakeholderism, etc., when you have the resources to do it, and when you have a political and legal tradition to do it, as happens not everywhere in Europe, to be very honest, because we also have EU member states where there are no such tradition and the resources are not that much to ensure this kind of approach. But this is why we think that cooperation, dialogue, and engagement of all stakeholders to help building this multi-stakeholder approach is important. Now, I want to be very clear that certainly when it comes to democratic countries, we believe that, well, it might be the government, it might be the parliament, I don't want to get into the detail, but to use the term government in a very broad sense, as it is sometimes used, the governments represent the people. So it is important to ensure multi-stakeholder participation. It is important that in certain cases, you also can have multi-stakeholder decisions. But we should never forget that in democratic settings, governments have an obligation to represent their people. So if they take the lead on certain issues, I think they should be in democratic settings, again. We think that they should be given the possibility to do that. And this is why we don't believe that having a universal notion that the governments have nothing to do with the internet or with InternetGovernance is not the reality, is naive, and it is in fact exclusionary towards a number of parts of the world, as has been mentioned, which perhaps need a little more cooperation to develop those kind of structures that are needed for better, more inclusive, and more democratic bottom-up involvement. Again, apologies for forgetting about not in this comment. Okay, I think that's yeah, I think that's it. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. So as I said, thank you very much to Diplo for organizing this webinar and for having me. Thanks to all of you for listening to me and for watching me. I'm sorry I couldn't watch all of you. That's always a bit of a bizarre experience, but I hope that the quality of the video and the audio was good. As I said, Diplo has my contact details, and Diplo is formally authorized to share my contact details with all of you. And if you want to follow up on any of the discussions, including those which, as I said, I could not and did not feel comfortable to get into details, please do write to me and we'll find a way to have those discussions. So again, thank you very much, and I wish you a good continuation of the afternoon. Bye-bye.